So with that, I am going to turn it over to my good friend Worley to take it away from here. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and welcome everybody. I am excited to be here. This is kind of one of my favorite topics to talk about right now. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of stuff to cover. So I do want to show some demos. I do want to answer questions about, you know, the issues, the things. I can talk about what's going on in the industry, but we'll jump right into it and talk about this rise of personalized AI agents, right? And, you know, for those of you who don't know me, again, as Adnan said, I'm the founder and CEO of StrangeWorks, which is a quantum computing advanced compute company. Eisenhower Fellow. I do a lot of IEEE standards, and I'm also the ambassador in the US for CERN and Society to help raise money for science and science projects there. This is what we're going to talk about today. When we say this personal agent thesis, what is it? It's what's happening now is you're using your data on your local machine using their intelligence, meaning that, you know, you've heard a lot of people talk about running models and running local models. You're running quantized models when you run them locally. I'm not a big fan of that. We don't really have the personal laptop and machine power to do anything super fancy. But with these personalized agents, you're using these giant hyperscaler infrastructures and their models, but with your data working with it on your machine. And so that's super important. And when you look at the most important thing, I think, to point out is 12 months ago, none of this really existed at all. And that, to me, is just mind-blowing as a concept. And even the things we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about Claude Cowork, which is an agentic desktop for, you know, knowledge work. You're working with your Excel files, your PowerPoints, things like that. That came out in January of this year. We can talk about Codex, which the Codex app came out in February of this year. So you have parallel agents working in Git trees, setting up sub-agent tasks to write codes, whether that be building an iPhone app or a website or Android app or some new program that you're going to run headless in a server infrastructure. GPT 5.4 came out in March, right? It's the first AI performing, you know, by some standards at above human capabilities. And then, of course, this month in April, Codex for Everything came out, where it actually will control your local computer. So when you look at the timeline of these things, it's mind-blowing, and the pace is not going to slow down. It's going to get bigger and faster, and it's going to be very hard to keep up with. So we're going to cover a whole lot of things, and I will tell you that since last night, when I started on this presentation, we'll talk about how I did that later, to this morning, there have been 2 announcements that will affect things in this presentation. So the pace isn't you get a yearly update or a quarterly update or a monthly update or a weekly update. There are daily updates. So when it comes to projects like OpenClaw, which is one of the ones I participate in, you know, we're sometimes pushing 2 updates in a day or 3 updates in a week. So this is something that, you know, I'd really advise everybody to get on top of. So there's 3 stacks we're going to cover primarily. We're going to cover OpenClaw and NemoClaw and some other stuff. But the thing I want to do is have each of you leave here today with something that's actually going to be valuable for your daily life. So we're going to look at 3 vendors. They all ship desktop agents. I personally am a Mac user, so I'm going to have them on my Mac, and I'm happy to show them there. But you've got Claude, which has Claude Desktop. That has their chat, their Cowork, and their code in one app. It's just tabbed kind of interface. There's also the Claude command line, which I'm a huge fan of. I use that one a lot. I use all of them. And then there's the MCP and the skills and the plugins that you can add to those. For OpenAI, we're going to cover ChatGPT a little bit, and most of you hopefully already know that. Really lean more into Codex. We'll talk a little bit about the Atlas browser, which is a new, yet another way they have to access that. And then really, you know, the Codex app, which is probably, if I were going to download one thing from OpenAI, that's what I would get. And then we're going to talk about Gemini 3. And when we talk about Gemini 3, and I'm going to make my little thing here. I don't know if I can. There we go. That'll go away. We talk about Gemini 3. There's so much good. And each one of these companies, you've got Gemini app, personal intelligence, you got the Chrome inclusion, and you got the Workplace Studio and anti-gravity. And of course, again, a command line interface, which I'm a big fan of. But when you look at each of these 3, and we'll cover this at the end, they each have 3 very different approaches. And the feature sets are kind of starting to look a lot like each other, but that approach and how they approach it is going to be really, really powerful for you. So let's start with Claude and Anthropic. This local first agents, right? It's your VM and your files. And it's really one app that has three surfaces. As I said, it has the chat, which is a conversational. This is where you can ask questions, skills, memory artifacts. There's the Cowork, which is kind of this agentic knowledge. So it runs in an isolated VM on your Mac or Windows machine. It can read your folders. It can, drives your connectors. So it can connect to things like Google Mail and Workspace and things like that. And it can execute things on a schedule. So you can say, every Monday, read this report and summarize it, or every Tuesday, triage my mailbox, or whatever the case may be. And then you have Claude Code, which of course has been super popular lately, which is basically agentic engineering. A lot of people call it vibe coding. I think that's from old school developers that are kind of throwing shade at the fact that everybody can be a developer right now. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think agentic engineering is what it should be called. And that's got parallel sessions. It integrates in the terminal. You can use it in different editors. Apple is integrated Claude Code into Xcode on the Mac, for example. So there's a lot of different ways you can access these things. We'll talk about a little bit of that later. So Claude Code is literally, Cowork is Claude Code for everything else. It's this amazing architecture. Again, it runs on your machine. It can run on a schedule. It can run with your tools, and it can run with your context, right? So it can have folder level instructions. It can have a global understanding of your machine. You can describe an outcome, step away, come back to finish work. And I'm gonna give you an example of that later in the presentation. And it's really, really impressive. Now, is it more impressive than some of these other tools? They're all starting to get fairly even in their capabilities. And again, that approach thing we're going to talk about later, that's going to be where things really, really come into play. But, an example of what you could do is you could easily do a Monday morning briefing where you trigger a schedule at 7 a.m. You have it read your data from your Gmail and your calendar or any folders you may have that you can have things automatically downloaded into. And then you can let it think about that. It can look at all of that data, plan, synthesize, cross-reference, and it can then deliver a markdown file called Monday MD that is like your one-page brief of everything. Now, if you want to extend the capabilities with Claude or Gemini or any of these others, you can go in and add a voice to it. I actually have mine where it reads the briefing to me every morning. So when I open up my machine, I say, good morning, tell me what's going on, and it reads a briefing of what I've got going on this week, emails that have come in that I haven't answered, which there's unfortunately a lot of, all of the things. So it's super useful. And if you wanted to do that, the command down there at the bottom of the screen is what you could add into your terminal to basically do that. It'll take very simple commands. Again, you don't have to be a developer to now write software or these kind of shortcuts or briefings and things like that. You just have to be able to describe them. You don't even really have to describe them that well for it to understand what you're talking about. So getting into Claude Code, you've got parallel agents using your GitHub repo. Now, the interesting thing is Claude Code scored about 80.8% of the SWE bench cert verified. That's software engineering. So that's, could it replace a software engineer, right? It's got about 1 million tokens in context in the beta, and it's got about 3,000 plus MCP integrations. So there is a lot of stuff it can touch. So for my system, I use all of these all the time, and I have them all set up. I have Claude Code connected to GitHub. I have it connected to Vercel. I connected to a bunch of stuff. And again, we'll do a little demo of that later. But these parallel sessions where you filter by status and project and environment, backed in an integrated terminal where you can do stuff without leaving that context, and then having that kind of desktop bridge so you can build GUIs on top of that and control it remotely is amazing. And now, if you're using one of these agents, and Claude and Gemini both kind of frowned on the OpenClaw thing, so you have to use tokens now instead of just the thing. But if you're using these agents, something like OpenClaw using Claude Code, you can also integrate it with your iMessage or WhatsApp or Telegram, and then you can literally remote control it. And so I can be at lunch and say, hey, I've got an idea, go research all of this stuff, put it all in a GitHub repository and start building the software, and go back to eating lunch and come back to my machine and have a full report and a full build out of that. And you're going to hear people be critical of this. You're going to hear people say, oh, the software isn't as good, or it's going to make mistakes when you do this. That's true. There are going to be things that aren't perfect. However, the amount of time it takes to when they get closer to perfect is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Okay, so one of the power moves that you can do if you want to do a couple of demos, and in a couple of minutes we'll show you exactly the power, is get Cowork and point it at a directory, point it at your downloads directory and tell it, hey, organize this downloads directory. Or if your desktop, I keep a very clean desktop, as you might have noticed. A lot of people have files all over desktop. Put your desktop and say, organize this desktop. And it will, if you want to tell it how to organize it, you can say, organize it because this is what's most important to me, or this is how I'd like it organized. It will do that automatically for you. Or you can just say, organize it, and it'll say, great, let me come up with the best way. I'm gonna create a folder for videos and a folder for files and a folder for PDFs or whatever. That's a really good one for you to kind of start getting that aha moment around these tools when you're using Claude. It's a very simple one. It's not a huge risky one, and I think it's a good one. The second one is parallel subagents on one repo. So if you have access to GitHub repo, and look, if you don't trust it, build a new one, fork some open source software, and just play with that. But you can have 3 agents in your work trees. You can be doing test, implementation, and docs on that GitHub repository all at the same time and watch it merge all of that activity together. Using it with GitHub is probably one of the most powerful things I've done with it that's been the most functional and rewarding. Stringworks has a ton of repositories across 8 years of building, a trillion lines of code, and being able to go in and say, I'm looking for the code segments that do this, this, and that, and I want you to document those. I want you to pull them to something new, build unit tests for it, and do the implementation of the code so I can run it locally. It is fantastic as a software engineer to be able to have that capability. It turns me into 20, 40, 100 software engineers. It's super powerful. And the other thing is, your company voice is a skill. So a lot of people are using ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and stuff to write emails and stuff, but you get this weird thing, which is it's really good at English, but you kind of know it wasn't written by you. You can take all of your other emails or writing samples or blogs and things you've done. You can take your company website and everything, and you can actually build a skill and make a skill MD file that has the tone and the constraints, words you want to say, words you don't want to say. It's irreverent, it's not in that, so that everything you do with it is in the voice of your company or in your voice. I use that tremendously. I'm actually working to put together a new podcast with my friend Ken Hertz called Indistinguishable, and I'm using that to synthesize, canonize kind of different styles to give that a single voice. So that's a little bit about Claude. Jumping into ChatGPT and Codex next. Their approach is, it's a super app, right? You've got one desktop, it touches all the surfaces, it does everything. And the interesting thing about that is it's the first model to technically be kind of above the human, right? It's unified code and reasoning and computer use all in one architecture. It beat Human Expert by a couple points, not huge, but that was very interesting. Again, you're looking at a 1 million token context window. That was up from 400K in the version 5.2. And you're looking at a lower coding score, but it's very interesting because although on the SWE Benchmark Pro, it did 57%, which was 10 points over its previous version, and less if you think about what we just talked about Claude. What was super, super interesting to me, blew my mind, is that I actually found myself using Codex to debug code that Claude had written. So on my personal computer, much to the dismay of my wife, I have the $200 subscription for all of these, right? I have the Gemini subscription, which actually $149. I have the Claude. I have the OpenAI subscriptions. And I found that although you might look at this and say, well, I should use Claude for coding, I've actually found Codex to be better at code personally. It's really, really good. There's a couple of entry points you can do this. You got the ChatGPT desktop, or you got the Codex app, which again, if I was going to download one, is the one I'd download. And then you have Atlas. And so Atlas is part of this new thing where they're trying to have browsers. I use Chrome personally every day, but it's basically a browser that has an agent built in that's in agent mode, right? So it remembers what you've looked at in there. It can use it next time. It can highlight text on a page. It can do some cool stuff. And by the way, you can do some of that stuff with Gemini and Chrome as well. But The desktop is where the real power is, specifically not a ChatGPT desktop, but in that Codex desktop. It is super, super great. I'm going to show you each of these at the end of the presentation here, so you can get an idea of what they look like, how to use them. Codex, 4 days ago, added a ton of features. So the number one feature it added was computer use. So you can have multiple agents on my Mac here in parallel while I work, doing various different things. That means I could have one looking at my email to summarize it, or doing that Monday briefing we talked about, while one is writing code, while one is building a website where that code will be hosted, where one is doing research. You can do quite a bit. On my Mac, it works really effectively. I've got a Mac M Pro 5. I've got 128 gigs of RAM, so it has plenty of room to breathe. And it's super cool. Now, there's also the in-browser app, which can do precise instructions, comment on DOM elements, things like that. And of course, it's got the GPT image 1.5, which you can mock up assets for your game or your application or whatever. Now, it has 90 plus plugins, okay? And that can be like GitLab or the Microsoft suite of tools and things like that. It does have heartbeat automations. So, the agent will wake up, it'll continue across days. You don't get, a loss of context necessarily over time. And it's got a memory preview, so it will really learn your style and how you work. I have recently started using this one a lot more since the new release, and I like it a lot. But again, I'm not going to pick one of these tools or one of these companies, not because I'm talking at Google, not because of not wanting to pick a winner, because right now at this moment in time, it's advantageous to all of us to use each one of them as we can. And I know it's expensive if you get the major subscriptions, but the cheaper subscriptions aren't that much, and it would behoove you to have each one. You might find that you like one for coding or one for research. For my OpenClaw instance, where I could use multiple agents, I like using Gemini for all my research, all my heartbeats, million tokens for 50 cents, phenomenal value. But I use Codex for coding, and I use Anthropic's Claude for the logic. So, when we talk to the harnesses about later, that's where you can start using each one of them in different capacities. And it's super, super valuable. If you look at what you could do, if you download this to do it, look at, asking what it needs its attention. Now, with Codex, you'll have to tell it, yes, you can access my Slack and my Gmail and this. Take you a few minutes to do that. But once you've done it, you can say, what needs my attention today? And have it scan Slack, Gmail, your calendar, Notions, whatever surfaces that matter. And across that app, give you a summary and say, you've got a message to respond to Adnan in Slack. You've got an email you need to send to Mary. You've got a thing, in your to-do list that is 4 days overdue, whatever the case may be. That sounds so simple, but we live in a world where we're just a deluge of information. There's so much data coming in every day that I don't know that I could manage my life right now without using these tools. And so a second demo you could do is a visual loop, and that's just generate a landing page for any website, whatever. And you can make up whatever you want. I want a website for food truck in Austin, or I want a website that makes me, my new product, that I'm going to make up and have you code as well. It's really, really cool. I think it's going to be scary for some people because my designer, we'll talk about him a little later, these tools just in the first 4 months this year have gotten so good that we redesigned the entire strangeworks.com in January, primarily just using AI tools and prompts, and it looks phenomenal. And so third thing you can do with that is this alt space anywhere. So you can do a screenshot to answer from any of your apps. So let me explain what that means. I had a form last night because I have a brand new camera that I busted, and they sent me this giant form. It needed all this stuff filled in. I was actually able to screenshot that, have it look through my mail, find the receipt, do everything, respond to that, fill in that entire form, and then write an email response, submit the form and send the email. So I was able to take that, and with the exception of it said, hey, I need 3 pictures of the camera, I need a picture of the damage or whatever, I didn't have to do any work on that. I proofread it, obviously, but it was super, super useful because, as you know, a lot of warranty forms, well, they're pretty complicated. And so now let's get to our host, Google, and to Gemini 3. It's not one product. There are 5 surfaces, but it's one brain. And I think when it comes to things like research and all, it's going to be very, very hard for other agents to compete with Google Again, not saying that to kiss Google's butt on this, but Google has a unique advantage in the agent game, which is they've been indexing the web and all of the knowledge and all of the books forever. They've already been through the like, oh, you scanned my book, lawsuits and stuff. They've gotten everybody on the same page. They've integrated everywhere. And so I'm a big fan of Gemini for a lot of reasons, but research is my number one. I absolutely love it for that. And so what are those 5 surfaces? Well, you've got the Gemini app, which just came out recently. I'm a big fan of it instantly. I've been using it quite a bit since its release. You got the Workspace Studio, right? It's kind of the no-code agents approach. You've got Chrome and all the auto browse stuff you can do. And then you've got anti-gravity, which is kind of like a mission control IDE. But then you also have not just Gemini 3, but more importantly, again, that command line interface. I'm a huge fan of the terminal and command line interfaces. I'll show you one that I use later when we get to kind of demoing some stuff. I'm really like the way Gemini has this read. But again, it can code, it can do images. Nano Banana and the research feature are 2 of my favorite features. Almost every image I make, I'm going to use Nano Banana. Every single time I do research, I start with Gemini Research. And so my workflow, if you look at it across those, I'll talk about in a minute, but it involves, again, all of these, because I don't think just leaning on one is a good plan. And so what's Workspace Studio? Workspace Studio is kind of agents for everyone, right? You can prompt it, if an email contains a question for me, label it to respond, and ping me in the chat. And you can have a bunch of starter steps and variables, right? So incoming Gmail message, Gemini 3 can reasons, is it a question? It can apply the respond label, and then it can ping you in a chat. I love using Google Workspace for all my companies, all my email, even my personal family stuff. So this is super useful for me. In Chrome, you've got the auto browse, right? So your browser can drive itself with your passwords under your rules. This is where people kind of get a little scared because, could have your banking password and stuff like that. I think it's amazing. You see this example for shopping that it gave. Plan a Y2K theme party, as a joke. Find matching decor, add to the cart under $150, apply discount codes, and just do it. I actually do some of my shopping in this way, specifically for things like when I'm having an event or a get-together. I need all of these things, plan it out, do it. I even have it buy stuff off Amazon and HEB for groceries. Like, I'm going to do a dinner for the family with this, check out the recipes, get everything you need, have it delivered to the house. Incredible time saver. And I'll talk about that at the very end, but time is probably the thing I think makes these things most valuable. For travel, again, you could have it auto browse and find you the cheapest flight from Austin to San Francisco for GTC week, or in this case for Google's event. And you can use miles if you close. You can email my assistant and coordinate with her. It's super powerful. And then you've got anti-gravity, which is kind of the mission control section. So you're the architect. The agents are going to go plan, execute, and verify across all of these things: the terminal, the browser, the editor. It's really powerful. And for people who aren't into software development and haven't really done it, it's a great IDE to use. A lot of people need that. My good friend Donald has been working on games in this and has recently become a big fan of all the agentic stuff. And he uses mission control as his kind of single pane of glass to look at all of the things he's doing agentically. So if you're going to download the Google stuff and you want a couple demos that in 2 minutes will really get you excited, Workspace Studio and the 30-second agent, right? Build that response agent we talked about. Send a test email, watch it work. You won't write any code. It'll just work. You can put it in the heartbeats and have it work on a regular basis. And that's awesome. I'm at a startup. I'm always raising money. I use this to set up one to watch for potential investor emails. So if I get a potential investor email, I get a ping in the chat. I know about it right away, which again, I'm getting hundreds of emails. So that's really valuable to be able to pick those needles out of that haystack. The auto browse in Aaron stuff, definitely cool. I mean, Chrome side panel will book a flight, apply the miles, draft an email, try to use it to book your next trip, or try to just use it to, tell it do all of these steps, but don't execute the last step. Really great use of this. And then of course, anti-gravity, tell it to build an app and test it in a browser and, create the graphics and everything. And you'd be extremely impressed. So That leads us into the convergence. So these three companies have one playbook. All of this stuff has kind of become real in the last 12 months. Why am I so big on it? First of all, I don't think this leads to AGI or superintelligence. I think it's really, really advanced automation. I think it's incredibly powerful for one reason. I can start a new company and go make more money. I can build new relationships. I can buy this thing and buy that thing. The one thing I can't buy, the one thing I can't manufacture, the one thing I have no control over in my life is time. And so your objective to me in using any of these tools should be to give yourself more time. I am a workaholic who's worked 20-hour days for most of my careers, very little sleep. A few years ago, I started getting too old for that, started sleeping about 6 hours a night. Last year, when these things started really hitting, I went from a 12 to 14-hour workday to probably about a 3-hour workday. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean, I'm working 3 hours and then I'm out? Obviously not. But what it means is that to do the things that were taking up that 14 hours now takes me, with meetings and everything, 2 or 3 hours, which means I have the bulk of that time to think about the company vision, to write white papers, to go and do events like this, to evangelize StrangeWorks. It frees up so much time. More importantly, I used to have to work a lot of weekends. It was just the way it was. And using these tools and all these agents, I don't think I've worked a weekend, this year. And it's amazing. And I spend more time with my family and with my kids and with my wife. My relationships with them have never been better because I'm able to use this technology to handle a bunch of stuff that has to be done, but doesn't necessarily need me to do it. And so when we look at all of these in context, capabilities, desktop app driving your operating system on your Mac or whatever, they all three do that now, right? They all three have browser agent, browser controls. They all three have the continuous task and scheduled task capabilities, all have the persistent memory, all have this plugin style architecture, so they can, you can add Microsoft stuff or Google stuff or whatever to the agent's capabilities, and they'll all do parallel agents and sub agents. So how do you choose? Like, if they all do the same thing, really, why would I use one over the other or use all three like you're saying? What's the difference? And that gets into the approach we'll talk about, which I keep mentioning in just a moment. But the other thing that they've all done, which is the most exciting thing for me as an old school Unix guy, is they all have command line interfaces, right? One npm install, one command, the agent's sitting in your repo doing stuff. Okay, so these are what you would need to install each of those and then run them. It is super awesome. I have all of them running on my system, and I often find myself working just in the command line, not even using the application. Because again, and I'll give you an example of that in just a moment, how I use it, it's totally different. You say, well, I'm not a command line person. I'm using the Windows or the Mac point and click GUI. None of that matters anymore. I literally just talk to my machine, and I'll show you that in a moment. So they all have the same capabilities, but they're different bets, and we talked about those approaches being different. This is the thing to take away on the real difference between them. Anthropic's going for this local first, your VM, your files, work staying on your machine, right? You've got that. OpenAI's, everybody knows, no secret, they're trying to build a super app. So eventually there's no Apple App Store, there's no Google App Store, no Android App Store. You have one app and it's OpenAI, and you say, do this, for me, build this app, schedule this event date with my wife, email these people, whatever, and it goes and it writes the software it needs to do that, and then it disappears. And I do think there's something to be said about the future of software being, there not being app stores and not being things. Bespoke software is amazing. My wife talks to my OpenClaw bot, Gloopy, about software she needs for her business. Great example, she loves Google Calendar, but she wanted a tool icon where she clicked on it and it just showed what she had that day. She could swipe to delete it, or she could do a plus sign and add something. And so she described that in her own words, in a not so long text, texted it over iMessage to my Mac Mini running one of my OpenClaw bots, and in 10 minutes it sent her back a zip file with instructions on double-click the zip file, drag this to applications, and run it. And was it an interface I would use? No. Was it the way I want it? No, but it doesn't matter, because the whole way we think about software has changed. She described what she wanted. She got what she wanted in a few moments, and she's never looked back. And so bespoke software is kind of where we're going. So these app stores and things, I think there's gonna be some interesting things that happen there. Now, Google, to me, has the best approach. I'm not saying that because I'm on Google, but again, they have this huge advantage of all this data. And so their approach is integrated. So putting agents live inside apps you already use every day. So it's in your Gmail, it's in YouTube, it's in your photos, it's in stuff. I do think over time, that's going to come out as a really, really big advantage. Again, I use all of these. I use all of those Google integrated things. I love the super app approach. I'm a big Codex user. I also use Anthropic, which I use every one of them every hour of the day. So that leads us into kind of the big elephants in the room, which are these new kind of harnesses. So OpenClaw was hugely successful. Peter Steinberger, known him for a while, my co-founder Justin Ewens, I know him back from our mobile days. It's super cool. It allows you to use any model. So you bring your brain, you could be using DeepSeek or Llama or Gemini or Claude or whatever, it doesn't matter. You can have it in any channel. So WhatsApp, iMessage, Telegram, Slack, doesn't matter, you integrate them. I use iMessage on my one OpenClaw bot that my wife is one of the only authorized people that will receive message from, so she can ask it stuff. It's fantastic. She hasn't asked me a question about anything about startups or her business. She just now talks to it or has it build a flyer for her or design a thing, and it's amazing. And then it can have persona and skills. So there's this idea of this soul file, which is where you can take that agent and give it your own flair. So maybe you want it to talk to you and be very direct. Maybe you want it to be very verbose. Maybe you want it to explain everything like you're 5 or not explain everything and just go do it. You can actually configure that. And no matter what model you're using, it will adhere to that. So your interaction with it will be very different. And then, of course, there's Claw Hub, which is where you can download a bunch of skills. Now, there's over 13,000 skills on there, and we're working on all the security stuff. There's been some things, some bad actors trying to get in there and all that. I don't download skills in OpenClaw. I take the description of the skill and I give it to my OpenClaw and say, build me one of these fresh, and it does it in a few minutes. And so I just have my own set of skills. I'm like, ooh, that's a great idea, but I'm not going to download that skill because I don't trust it. I'm going to take that description, I'm going to feed it into the engine and have it build it itself. It's super cool. This has been the 4Stack. It is the most impactful open source project in the history of open source. It surpassed Next.js. It surpassed everything, including Linux in its GitHub stars. Not the only way to measure things or necessarily the best way, but it is a pretty impressive feat. And this is something that I use every day. Can integrate it also to have voice through 11 Labs or XAI or Google or any of these. So it's really, really cool. And it's made such a big impact that in March, NVIDIA got up on stage and did a deal where they said, we're announcing NemoClaw, which is the enterprise safe version of OpenClaw. And so it runs in NVIDIA's OpenShell runtime. It's sandboxed, it's got network policed, it's locally inferenced. The sandbox lets have file system lock, so the agent only sees what's in the sandbox and nothing else on your disk is reachable or compromised. It has a network policy, so every hop is approved, so unlisted hosts are blocked, and it's surfaced in a TUI for operator approval. The ingress is explicit, not implicit. Very, very cool. And it's got the Nemotron on device, so it'll route inference to Nemotron on your DJX Spark. No prompts, no data, no context leaves the machine. Very, very cool. And also a sign of where things are going that NVIDIA jumped on this so fast and got this out. It was a big part of their latest announcements and conference. And if you want to check that out, there's the command right down there. You can curl it in and you can run through the NemoClaw onboard and get it set up. Super, super interesting. I don't think it's the first one you'll see. I don't think it's the last one you'll see. And Dell recently announced a very, very powerful, it's a desktop. It's like an $80,000 desktop machine set up to run all of this with local models locally and everything. So super, super cool. And so the one thing many of you probably haven't heard of, though, although those harnesses are cool, and there's tons of forks of OpenClaw, I personally would stick with OpenClaw or NemoClaw, is Paperclip. And so if OpenClaw is the employee, right, it's this thing that you tell to do stuff and it does it. Paperclip is the company. And so what Dot has done is created an orchestration layer that uses org charts and budgets and tickets and audit logs. And it's really, really cool. So what you do is you're the board member. You set up something like OpenClaw or NemoClaw, and then you install Paperclip on top of it. So it is an abstraction layer. What Paperclip allows you to do is it allows you to create an org chart where you build a CEO agent and you build the best agent you can. You tell them the CEO agent does this and knows that and works in this and works in that. And then you give it a task. And so instead of just giving a task directly into an agent or directly into like OpenClaw's framework, it will say, the task is build a PRD and an MRD. I'm going to need an architect/developer, and I'm going to need a writer and market researcher, and it will go and build these employees in an org chart like you see there on the left. And you can control them by saying, don't let this one spend more than this many tokens, and have tickets from this one flow to that one, et cetera, et cetera. It does almost all that by itself, uses its own logic, and any agent with a heartbeat can be hired and put into that. It's a really good way for people starting off to think about using agents as a company structure. Say, I've got 12 development agents and 2 marketing agents and a sales agent. Because a lot of times when people are in agents and sub-agents, it's really easy to get confused and the computer's just spitting off these things. It's a nice visual interface for this. And again, it gives you some controls on cost and everything that personally I'm a pretty big fan of. So, you can hire anyone. You can use Claude Code, OpenClaw, Codex, whatever. You can budget tickets. So you can say, hey, I never want to wake up that $400 bill, which, by the way, has happened to everybody in here at some point. And then it can also, you can download the whole company. So you can download pre-built org charts of companies like a trading desk or a marketing firm or whatever, and then just be like, this is what I'm going to use now. I know a person who's in marketing who uses Paperclip. They downloaded the marketing org and they quit their marketing job and have started their own company. Their company is all agents. And I think you're going to see this more and more and more. One of my friends, Chris Sham, has started a company called Akem, AKEM, which is in the finance area. There's him. My buddy Tony is the CTO. They've got a designer and an advisor. And that is a completely agentic company that probably operates on the level of a company that has 100, 200 employees. But there's, 4 guys that meet twice a week for 30 minutes. So these agents can really be powerful, and they're going to change the way we do all of this. So takeaways for you in the last couple of minutes we have here before we show some stuff. Go build the Monday briefing, right? Do the downloads cleaner. Build a voice for your company or yourself. Use a Workspace Studio triage agent. These are really simple things. And here's the thing people don't understand. If you don't know how to do it, just ask the agent what you're trying to do. You do not have to be a developer. You do not have to have a huge amount of skills to be doing any of these things, or even things that are far more complicated than that. And so here's the last kind of point is, I didn't build any of this. I didn't build the slides. I didn't do the design. I didn't write it. I did none of that. The content, the design, the code, all of this was built by agents last night. So the research, search the web, found every product, every feature, every install command, all of that current as of today, every word, the titles, the stats, the quotes, chip labels, all of it, conversions framing, all built by agents. Every pixel of this PowerPoint deck was designed, the palette, the topography, the gradients, all of it, and everything was put straight into a PowerPoint. No Keynote, no Figma, no deck tools, no designers. So 32 slides, 1 prompt, 1 agent, no designers, no writers, no nothing. And this is all I typed to build this entire thing. Said I'm giving the following presentation. I put a link to Google's post for the community post that they did. Said I want to cover the desktops for these things. I want to cover as many ways to use them that are relevant, to the links says and what the talk's going to be about. I also need some cool ideas of things that'd be easy to do and very valuable to users. These need to be done by being broken down for each app. Go. That's what I typed that created this. And so with that, I'm going to pull up. There were some things that happened, and so I'm going to share this with you. So this is the entire conversation to build. I built this and it built the agent. And then this morning I came in and I noticed that a couple things were out of alignment, and I feel, oh, I want to add this and I want to add that. So these are just things. Most of this is it talking, not me. I've put in like 3 things, and one of the changes said, hey, I like the previous design better. I changed the design. I said, make it a little different. I said I liked it better, and these things are out of alignment. There was a little star behind the quote here, and the org chart wasn't aligned, etc. And it just did it all. And I just downloaded a PowerPoint. And so this is how these things work. This is how everything should be done. I can't imagine a life without these tools, without the integrations and the way that I work with them now. And it literally, it didn't 10x me or 100x me. It made me, 500x, 1,000x, 10,000x. And so with that, I think I nailed the timing on the 10 minutes left if there are questions in the Q&A, Adnan. But I'm also happy to show things. And one of the things I want to do right now is I want to pull up Claude, just because I have it integrated with my stuff, not for any other reason. And so I'm going to pull Claude up here. You should be able to share that, okay? And so...
so whilst you're doing that, Wally, I'm going to launch a quick poll for the audience if they would like to see a second session on this where you do a more in-detail demo.
I would.
Right? So
we kind of did this for this is supposed to be for a catch-all. Anybody can get value out of it, etc. I see a lot of thumbs, so I think a second session might be. But let's do something cool right here. So this is Claude, and we've got the PowerPoint on the desktop, right? And here's what I'm going to say. There's a PowerPoint on my desktop that has a lot of information in it. I've just given this presentation, and I'd like you to build a website and host it in Vercel that gives links and a quick overview of all the tools and technologies I've done and any other details you think are relevant. Could you go ahead and build that website for me? And so that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, let's go. And then it's going to go through and build that website. And so, Adnan, we can do some Q&A while it's doing that.
Right.
And then,
okay.
And then I'll go to the Vercel and we'll see what it built.
Okay.
And then we'll put the URL in the chat so everybody can go get the download resources.
Okay, great. So whilst it's doing that, okay, so we've got a lot of questions. So Burley, you're going to have to sort of go through this in rapid fire.
Lots of them as fast as I can.
So, okay, the first one's from Bill Turner. Do you believe architecting identities into agents is similar to how Kubernetes is signed?
There's similarities amongst all of this. Remember, all of these things were built out of some standard software stuff, right? And they kind of they didn't just steal the data from all the websites to train the models, right? They stole kind of the way we work and the way we do things. So yeah, I mean, there's some similarities. I think that, look, I don't want to depress anyone, but software development, the way we use Kubernetes, the way we do things, all of this has changed more in the last 3 months and has changed in the last 30 years of my career. And so, at this point, it's about how we do it. And right quick, just so hang on, we'll interstitial this stuff. Saying clean, modern website, dark, aesthetic, bold, and editorial. Let's do the clean and modern one, and we'll pick that one. We'll make it a single page website. We'll do a Vercel subdomain. We'll upload the file there for everybody. And so you'll see how fast it's working. So it's going to start working on that. And literally, you guys can have the PowerPoint and all the other stuff in a few moments on a website you can download. Adnan, what's the next question?
So the next question is from Daniel Zivkovic, and he loved the takeaway on the platform convergence. Now that the model vendors, Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, MS, AWS, Databricks have largely solved the platform problem, what do we tell enterprises who went all in on custom AI platforms pre-2026? And are we still stuck building?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So I think, look, I think at the end of the day, if you're an enterprise who's like, I'm going to build my own model, my own thing, we thought about that at Strangeworks 6 years ago. And Justin Hewins, my co-founder, his credit, said that's going to be, kind of useless building the custom stuff. I think that, you know, you're not stuck still building those. I think it's time for those enterprises to figure out which one of these kind of big platforms that they're going to adopt and bring in. Of course, the U.S. government switched from Anthropic to OpenAI for, you know, a variety of weird reasons. There's a lot of changes in them, but it's moving at such a pace that it would be impossible for you as an enterprise to be duplicating that effort. And so think of it like a classic build versus buy decision, right? And I think in this one, it's definitely on the buy side. Like it's
right.
very much so your basic build versus buy. All right, go ahead.
All right, the next one. As a non-billionaire, are the middle ground $17 subscriptions sufficient? You know, what does the 10x cost? Come on, this is a question I think all of us have, right?
This is a great question, and I get asked this question a lot. And first of all, I am not a billionaire, but and my wife does not like the credit card statements. She's like, "You spent $1,600 on AI this, you know, every month." But here's the thing that you have to realize. This is the way I do it. Forget what it costs, forget your budgets, forget all of that stuff. Put that out of your mind for a second and think of it from this manner. Just like that enterprise build versus buy decision. Think about it as you don't have enough time. Take your annual salary, right? Divide it up and figure out what an hour of your time is worth. Or make up what an hour of my time is worth X, right? And then you can reverse in and say, you know what? For $20 a month, across these three, $60 a month, I can get, you know, if an hour of my time's worth $200, I spend the $60, I save an hour a month. It's already a net win, right? If I save 10 hours a month, for me, I'm spending $1,600 a month. I think my time is very valuable. I'm involved in a lot of projects that I really love. I love helping the Eisenhower Foundation. I love helping CERN, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, all these things. For me, I'm able to do, you know, 100x as much easily. But when I look at it, I say, what's my time worth? So let's say my time is worth $200 an hour. Okay. All right. That means at $1,600 for me to break even, it has to save me 8 hours a month. When you think about it that way, it puts it really into perspective because I'm saving 8 hours a day. Right. So, I mean, it is a no-brainer for me to spend that money. And so is it, you know, again, my wife doesn't like that budget. I don't know. It's definitely not been approved by my household CFO, but the impact it has in time is incredible. And so don't think about the $200 a month versus $100 a month and $20 a month. Think of what your time is worth, an hour of your time. Figure out what you want to spend and how many of those hours you can save and figure it out. And I know people that last year I told that started with just the $20 accounts and even the free accounts, started saving a lot of time. And then as they did it, they started ratcheting up what they were spending because they were getting more and more value out of it. You don't need to start with the $200 a month account. You can start with the free account. You know, if you're going to want to spend something and you're on a budget, and again, not because of Google hosting this, but Google Gemini is $149 to add to your workspace if you have a workspace. And it's a lot. That's a lot of power for $149. If you're a Google user like I am, you know, you get the slides and the docs and the drive and the sheets and all of it. It's super, super powerful. So again, look at it for how much. The point should be time, not can I go make a bunch of money with this or all the things you read about on X and online. The point should be like, how do I use this to improve my life? I'm achieving more at work. I'm spending more time with my family. I have more time. I have a hobby now, photography. I've never had a hobby the entire time Adnan's known me. And I'm having the best time of my life. This is the greatest time to be alive in the history of our species. But everybody's trying to find out like how it makes them a millionaire, or this or that, or where he's going to make them unemployed. Just use it to get yourself more time. And it is just unbelievably valuable, right?
All right, we've got 3 more questions. We're going to blast through them really quickly. Okay. So Samuel Bieberich wants to know, do you see the prices of these subscriptions increasing over time, considering the immense compute costs?
Question. I'm just interrupt that. That is the best question ever. Let me tell you right now, my biggest fear of this technology, Terminator fears, stupid. Okay, I gave a talk at the Vatican on the arrogance of man and the age of thinking machines, where I talked about all of these things that could go wrong that are nothing like what we imagine. That is the number one thing that worries me, is that these subscriptions go from $200 a month to $2,000 a month to $20,000 a month. And you saw Anthropic raise their enterprise prices in the last week. And so this is going to happen. And so there's going to be this divide of the have and have nots based on these prices, because think of Uber and how VC subsidized it. Now my Uber Black ride is $50 to go from Westlake to downtown. That's going to happen with these models. They can't be subsidized forever. They're going to try to go IPO to take retail investor money, and SpaceX is going to IPO before them. A $2 trillion IPO is not going to allow the market to have 2 other $1 trillion IPOs right behind it. The pricing is 100% going to go up. Anyway, sorry, Rambo.
So there's a part 2 to that question. And so should we be prepared to localize your agents in that case? Does that make sense?
Yep. And yes, the answer to that is there are absolutely going to be the need for you to be approaching this from a how can I localize. Now, when you localize your quantizing agents, you need about 1 terabyte of RAM to put some of those models in, and I'm gonna tell you right now, those models will not be as good as the larger hyperscale models.
All right. Okay. So one last question before we wrap up. And I see Bo Girardelli. Hey, Bo, thanks for joining us. So the question is, what kind of software companies will remain relevant in your opinion? We've seen this drop in stock market price for a lot of software companies because of AI. So what does that mean?
I'm going to tell you that I don't think that happens. I think software is dead as we know it. I hate to say that, but everyone is a software developer now. If you don't believe that, I think you've got your head in the sand. Okay, my 10-year-old is building a Roblox game. Roblox has a interface, like an old 3D interface. You got to put in all the variables and all stuff, and he couldn't do it. So he just asked the AI, "How can I make this work without that?" And what the AI decided was that it would take the resulting file of Roblox, index a bunch of them, and it would just write the file, and he just opens it in Roblox to test it, right? So it's crazy, and that is just it's software changes forever, and it's just where we're at. It's just what's happening, and there's nothing else that you can do about it, and there's just not. I'm sorry. Those are the facts.
All right. Well, with that, let's wrap up today's session. Again, thank you very much, Burley. This was very informative. Lots of great audience interaction. I think a lot of people learned a lot, including myself. So, yeah. So for the audience, again, thank you for spending a part of your morning, your afternoon, or your evening, wherever you are with us. For our next session next week, here's a QR code. This is going to be Will Granis, who is the CTO for Google Cloud. Again, I promise you it's going to be an exciting session. And we have more upcoming events, as I mentioned, next week and the weeks thereafter. We've got several in-person events coming in as well. April 23rd, Las Vegas, April 30th in London, and May 12th in Detroit. So again, the ones in London and in Detroit are focused on financial and in manufacturing, respectively. So lastly, as closing comments, go to our website, sign up, subscribe. I promise we will not use your email for any other purpose other than to send you updates as well as upcoming talks to register. You can sign up on that email list over there. You can catch up on past sessions, find recordings of the previous webinars that you may have missed. And in case you haven't tried Google Cloud already, it's really great that you get $300 in free credits. You can sign up at that price. At that link over there. If you're a research institute or you're a startup or a nonprofit, there's different tiers. So go to those links and learn more about how you can get access to many of the great technologies that Worley talked about today and build your own personal agentic system. Now, a great big word of thanks to everybody who makes these sessions possible, obviously to our speakers, to our attendees, but it takes a small village to bring all of this together. You just see, Jay or myself, do the presentation, but there's a whole team of people who work around the clock to make this happen. And all of this would not have been possible had it not been for the work that Mary does or our fearless leader, Bill Magro. And with that,
and one quick thing before you do that, Adnan.
Yeah, go ahead.
One quick thing, which is, as promised, if I can share right quick, our AI agent has built, and I'm going to share this, a website, and is now deploying to Vercel. And this is the website that it built while we were answering the Q&A, and that, which is this website about it, where you can download it, you can jump to all the tools. It has the whole thing. If we go to the tools, it has a list of where you can download all of the things that I've mentioned and everything. And all of this was built, including all of the codes you want to run it, where you can cut and paste them and everything, all including the deck, all built in the time that we were doing that Q&A.
That is amazing. So on that note, let's wrap up. Again, thank you very much, everyone. And we will see you next week. Thank you very much, Worley. And take care. Hope you have a great rest of the week. And we will see you next week. Bye-bye.